course. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So everyone, this is Ariana. She is part of our 12-week mentoring program. Awesome, thank you. And we were actually supposed to be in the middle of enrollment right now, and we filled this morning, which was very unexpected and really exciting. So I still wanted to do this live because our next enrollment will happen in March, and even someone earlier today was like, do you think I could talk to somebody from the group and just ask them some questions? And I told them about this live. I don't know if they're here yet. But I just think it's really helpful to have somebody who's going through the program to kind of tell us what they thought of it, to tell us how it's helped their practice, to tell us a little bit about your practice. But for anyone who doesn't know, the 12-week program is for OTs and OTAs, and it really is intended to review everything that I wanted to know more about in my first few years. Like, I had a great mentor, and my first year kind of dived into reflex integration, but felt like I didn't know so much. As OTs, there's always so much that we have to learn, but felt like I was really lacking in sensory processing, really lacking in feeding knowledge and oral motor knowledge and all of this stuff. And I think as OTs, we want to have as much knowledge as soon as possible and want to be good at all the things, and it takes time. But I wanted to create this program to allow our therapists to have the knowledge, but also have the mentorship behind it, because it's one thing to go out and read an article or go out and read a book or take a course, but not having someone to go to and bounce ideas off of, or say, hey, can you confirm I'm thinking about this the right way, I think is really, really lacking in our field right now. And even more so since COVID, and so many businesses are putting, making money first, which I understand a business has to make money to stay open and to have therapists, but the business also has to have good therapists to stay open, and you kind of have to balance both.
Right.
So Ariana, do you want to tell us a little bit about your OT career, kind of what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So I am 25, almost 26 years old. And I always want to preface that, because when I tell people I have a private practice, they're like, wait a minute, how did that even come to be? So I graduated in 2021, 2021, which is crazy that we're already in 2023. And when I graduated in May, I took my boards over the summer, and I didn't know exactly what field I wanted, what part of OT I wanted to do. I loved adults, I loved kids, and I was like a lost little soul trying to figure out where I was going to end up. So I had said, I took my boards, I passed, I got my license, and I'm like, I'm going to take a couple months to just figure it out. I was working in other business, so I was making money, and I realized that I wanted to go into pediatrics. I wanted to go into private practice for the flexibility it really offered and would be able to offer me. I was in the process of applying with another private peds clinic in my town, and a family friend reached out to me, and this family friend has an ABA business. So that's her whole thing. And she basically said, are you able to work yet? Do you have everything? I might have an opportunity for you in your county. And I was like, tell me more.
Give me all the information.
I know, tell me everything. So I briefly spoke with her. She made it sound like it was the best thing since sliced bread. She was like, you'd be walking into a caseload, you would have a room stocked full of stuff. She painted the picture. And then I spoke with one of the other women that were at the clinic. And that's where I found out that I would be essentially taking over and starting a private practice, because the woman that was there before, she had suddenly passed away. So there wasn't any plans in place of anybody to take it over. And the other therapists there that are speech therapists really wanted somebody to come in from a referral. They wanted somebody that would mesh with them, mesh with the kids that have been there, and whatnot. So within the span of, I think, 4 days, that all happened and came to be, which it was the stars just aligned, because the other woman never sent me the paperwork she was supposed to send me. So it was all
You're like, this is perfect.
As it should have. The only downside to it, and we said it from day one, was that I wouldn't have a mentor.
Yeah.
I went into it knowing that. They brought me on knowing that and were very trusting in me and almost like just breathed belief into me, that I could do it. And I was always the type of person, I work really hard. So I knew I would go out of my way to find what I was missing. It would just take a little bit of extra work in the process. And then I had followed you at some point in the last year, because I was getting so many kids with sensory processing. And I'm like, we didn't touch on any of this in school.
Or it's like a day. Like here's your small little section of your small little piece course.
Yes.
And you get out there and you're like, but this is everything. Like
literally was every single kid that chose to stay on our caseload and that has come onto my caseload since, especially these last couple of years. They all have some sensory thing going on. And I was like, okay, I definitely don't know nearly enough that I need to know. And when you had posted for the enrollment for the course, it was one of those, like, I saw it. I asked my dad, I'm like, do you think this is like a bright idea? And it went through all of the areas that I needed more information on, like feeding, reflex integration, sensory processing, even like down to the evaluations. Like, yeah, I was doing them based off of what I learned in school, but like, I don't
know what you don't know
to an extent. So every single area was an area that I was like, okay, I could really benefit from more information on. Plus, like you said before, the mentorship piece, that was key. Like to have another human on the other end, to have the rest of us in this cohort, kind of being able to work together and bounce ideas off each other as though it was almost like we went to school together and we were in a class kind of thing, has been just incredible for it.
And that was like my goal. Like, you know, so I did mention it earlier, the mentoring group has a like portion that is done offline. You do it on your own. And then we meet weekly for 75 minutes. And I really wanted it to be like small group. There's 10 people in each live. I wanted it to be a small group so you felt comfortable sharing and felt comfortable kind of like, you know, expressing any concerns you had or frustrations or like wins or anything going on. Like I didn't want it to be like a course that you have with 400 other people and you're nervous to say anything in it because you're like, all these people are watching me, all these people are listening to what I'm saying and I don't want to be judged. And I really wanted it to be like a judgment-free zone. And I feel like each group has a different dynamic, but each group I think still has that feeling of these are my people and like I can connect with them and share things with them.
100%. And I think that was definitely accomplished in it, because we all came to the table with the vulnerability and like the courage to say, like, we're all here because I think all of us raised our hand when we said, like, who feels like they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, even the therapists that have been therapists for 15 years are still raising their hand saying they feel like they know what they're doing. And then there's me and a couple of the others that are like, okay, we're new grads, we really don't know what we're doing. But it's like we all kind of were able to come together on that and like realize that we're all really in the same spot. No matter how long we've been in the field, like we're always learning. We'll never know everything there is to.
And you should never feel like, I keep saying this, but like you should never feel like you know everything, because at that point, like we're not, like, yeah, you're just then like cutting yourself off to all of these opportunities where there's still so much room to grow. And as an OT, there's so many areas that, like, especially if you work in peds and you're a generalist, or even if you are, I worked in a sensory clinic for 3 years, like even if we're focused on sensory processing, I still need to know a lot more information to help inform my decision. Like there's never going to be a time period where I think I know everything.
Right. Exactly.
I do want to say, like, you are one of a few therapists that are on the newer end, but have started their own clinic or their own practice. And I think that that is becoming a little bit more common these days. I think maybe a little bit having to do with like where OT is right now and people's unhappiness with working for other people who maybe aren't thinking about like the health of our clinicians, or like we said, the mentorship piece. But what's amazing is you are each taken the initiative and like motivated to find yourself somebody. So like the whole thing with going out on your own, no matter how, much experience you have, is I don't have somebody like, above me to mentor me, but you took the initiative to find someone. And I think that that is really important and a like really good thing for our younger therapists to see, or newer therapists to see, is like, yes, you can do it. Get the support. Like get somebody to, and it's so nice that you had and have other practitioners like in your space. So you still have people you can talk to, but now you also have the OT group that you can talk to, and the OTs that like you can bounce ideas off of and get like, multiple different thoughts and opinions.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I wouldn't be where I am, or probably still in this position, if I didn't have all of those pieces, right? If I didn't have the speech therapists that were already in the office that were able to help and support me on like things like billing, right? That they don't teach us in school at all. The insurance world, like all these things that play into it, they're all such an important integral part, because like, instead of going to a job where somebody pays me because I show up, it's like, I need to make sure I get paid myself from insurance, right? So having all of these different moving pieces and people that support me on like the accounting end and the billing end and the mentorship end, all like come together. It's like, I am because we are kind of thing, right? It's never going to be a one-man show.
No. And like, it's kind of crazy if a lot of people do it in the very beginning, because it's like, well, I don't have the, whatever it is to afford other people. Right. But for you to do everything on your own, especially as a business owner, like you need support. Yeah. And you realize that and you like do something about it.
Oh yeah.
You're like, so very quickly.
Yeah. For sure.
What has been your like favorite thing about the group?
There's like two pieces to it. So I think the one is because I'm such a type A, like the actual program itself and like the resources you provide us and like all of that is incredible. Awesome. Like everything I went through is saved on my computer and I refer back to on a daily basis, without a doubt. So like that piece is huge, because it's almost like I want to go and like Google that stuff, right? Because I don't want to sit there and like flip through my 500-page textbooks to find the answers. So to almost have it like somebody went through it and like put it in a nice little PDF for us is perfect, and like picked out the important things we really need to know and left the fluff out. But then also having that opportunity to meet weekly live and not just like watch a recorded lecture, and to have that sense of community, it's like that's second to none, because like you said, we get to have the real-time conversations of bouncing ideas off each other and learning about what different people do. And like the people in my cohort do so many cool things and work with similar but different populations, where I learn a ton just from listening to them share.
Right. I don't know. So for those of you that don't know, we met last night, and I don't remember if you were on the part of the call, but one of the girls started talking about one of her clients, and even myself, I'm like, I've never worked with a client like this. And in the beginning, I feel like people are not nervous, but don't want to take the time to like, they feel like they're using everyone's time to ask questions sometimes. Mm-hmm. And, having someone talk about one of their clients who none of us have ever had experience with, I think is like so helpful for everyone listening and everyone participating. Because when you do have a client like that, or when you do come across somebody who's maybe showing the same, challenges, or like, it's going to help you then in the future be like, oh, I remembered, when we said this, and maybe like I can try these few things.
Yep.
And thank you for mentioning the piece about feeling like all the resources were like no fluff, because that's my thing, is like,
oh yeah,
I hate taking a course and being like, this is all stuff that is like super basic, or stuff I already know, or like stuff I don't need to know. And my goal was, and I feel like I keep adding stuff, like I never want to overwhelm you guys, but like with every cohort, I like add more things. And I'm like, I wonder if I should pull back a little bit. Like, is this too much? But I want you guys to have access to it. Like, especially for those of you who are in your first few years, like, I didn't have the time to look up research articles. I didn't have the time to
No.
read books. Like, you're just focused on surviving and
Right.
like,
Today.
how do I figure out, about this client? And so like, for me, I'm like, okay, if I can give these research articles under, each of the topics that we're discussing, then that's one less thing that they have to do.
Yeah, no, it is very much so appreciated because we hear so much about evidence-based practice, evidence-based practice, evidence-based practice. And I'm like, okay, that's amazing, but who's taking the time to do all this research? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and I know I could probably speak for a lot of the others too, in like my time during the day. Like, if I'm not with clients, I'm doing like the admin work, right? I'm doing all the back end work. Whereas somebody else that may be working in a private practice or like a sensory clinic, they're going back to back all day with clients.
You have 35 kids a week, 30 kids a
Yeah,
week. Like,
they don't want to
don't
go
have
home and do research. You know what I mean? Like,
no, because you're going home and doing your notes, really. Which
right.
I we talk about this in actually next week in burnout.
Yeah.
We talk about trying not to do that so you don't get burnout super fast.
Session. I mastered that when I was doing my field work in the hospital because like, if you didn't do the men in there, you didn't do them at all.
Yeah.
But just like, we want to go home and we don't want to think about work. Like, especially if we're not getting paid on the other end.
Right.
Be doing that stuff, right? So to have that is massive because it's like, and also I know for me, when I was in school, I had access to all the databases from school, so it was totally different. Now I don't have access to as much.
Okay.
So it's like, where do you want us to get the research?
Right. Also, I realized, and I think this was before I started your cohort, so I don't even know if I said anything, and I don't know if you guys saw the video. If you still have access to your school email, you might have, okay. I found my, like, I graduated in 2013, and I found my, like, NYU student ID, and I could still log into, like, the library system. And so I could get access through that and access research articles. And I was like, does anybody else know that they can do this?
Some do. Seton Hall ended hours after 2 years, so mine ended. Bummer. Or maybe a year. Mine ended last year.
Yeah. Bummer.
I know.
I do have another question for you, but if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in here. What has been your favorite topic to talk about? I didn't ask you this one prior, but
so they really are all like, we're all like areas that I was like, oh my God, this. I have to say, out of all of them, reflex integration has been like the most fascinating and the one I've probably been able to directly implement the most, especially in my evaluations or even with kids that I've been seeing, but I wanted to kind of look a little bit further. I'm shocked at how many of my kids have retained reflexes. Like, it's mind-blowing to me. I was like, oh my God, I felt like I was in school, like learning something brand new all over again. Like, oh my God.
In school you learn, okay, that we have reflexes. Right. They integrate at a certain point, but you learn nothing beyond that.
That's it. So to see that and to really see how that could be playing into a child's deficits and struggles and difficulties was really, really mind-blowing to me. Sensory processing, I think, is just an area that could use a whole year to study. But then the whole feeding piece is so interesting to me too. And that was always an area that my experience with it was, aside from eating, right, because that's us, feeding was always speech in my mind. When I was in the hospital, when I was in field work, when I was in school, like, it was always speech does feeding. And then I learned speech did cognition too, and when I was in the hospital. But I'm like, that's our area.
Yeah, there's so many overlaps.
So that was interesting too, to kind of see our role in all of that.
I was with you. I think for my first job was in early intervention in Illinois. We did not do any feeding. When I went to California, I was like, oh, OTs just don't do feeding. Like I had assumed the feeding therapist, and she's just specialized in feeding. I was like, oh, she's a speech therapist. And I'm like, no, she's an OT. I'm like, oh, all right, like great. Let's learn more about this.
Yeah, that was a shock. But good one.
Good. I'm glad that all of the sessions have brought value into your practice and like given you things to kind of like expand where you can go with your practice
Yeah.
too. And like the goal is that confidence. Like, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And so like I feel like so many of us, like you said at the beginning, just like aren't confident with what do we do? Or like someone actually mentioned it earlier, talking about even just fine motor skill. Like, you know, I understand the fine motor element to it, but am I looking at all the things? Like I can say this is, you know, a challenge for this person, but am I understanding exactly why? Is it a visual piece? Is it a sensory piece? Is it a reflex piece? Is it another piece? Like there are so many things to look at for like something very simple or something that you might think is super simple, but having all these different areas and knowledge in all the different areas really helps you better understand what's going
Yeah.
on.
That's my favorite because a lot of my kids come to me with handwriting, right? And mom just thinks it's straight up handwriting. And when I always tell them, I just told a mom today who called and she was like, my son can't draw a circle. Like she called me in a panic. And she was like, I've been calling everybody. Nobody's taking new patients, whatever. But she was like, he's going to be 4. He can't draw a circle. So she was like, every other area, he's fine. Like gross motor, jumping, this, that. I'm like, okay, when he comes to an eval, like I'm going to look at all of the pieces.
Yeah.
I said, because I really want to be able to put a full picture together. And that was something that I definitely knew from school. Like I have to like give myself some credit there. In that like I always looked at the visual piece because I always knew that that played a part. The sensory piece, the posture piece, like there's so much more to handwriting. Like parents thinks it's literally just this. And it's like, no, it could be all of this. And it's us being able to know in order to educate the parent. And that's really where I know that I have like learned something when I'm able to regurgitate it to somebody else
Yeah.
and explain to a parent in like layman's terms, then it's like, all right, we got this down pat.
Right. Right. Like you being able to say like without the feeling of like, oh no, I have to like think about this first. Like you just being able to say like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And it helps you feel more confident. It helps the parent feel more confident in what's going on. Like it really, really does help.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. We're way over what I said we were probably going to be. Thank you for hanging out and sharing. It didn't look like there were any questions that pop up, but if anyone does have a question, you are welcome to message me or Ariana. I'm just volunteering you.
Message. My DMs are open.
As soon as it came out of my mouth, I'm like, maybe not.
Absolutely can.
Thank you.
I get full.
And if you are interested in joining our next cohort, we're gonna start enrollment in March. So thank you for everyone who joined us, and thank you, Ari.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.